So we have already discussed the passage. We have done the dissection of it. We have done the skeleton. We have written the key points. So now let's look at the questions one after the other. The author suggests that Fisher and Hamilton was similar in that both scientists conducted their research at approximately the same time. So do we have any information on it? Okay, now before I get into this question, right, the second part of my approach, the two-step approach that I generally follow in RCs, let me talk about that. Number one is understanding RC, read it and write the skeleton, right now, as I said, don't worry, take time, write it, dissect it, put down, look for the keywords, try to understand the author's tone, interest, intention behind each and every line. Don't worry about it, right? Try to look at from author's lens, right? Try to understand why is he writing this passage? Why is he actually giving certain arguments? What is his agenda? What is his point of view? What is his bias? If you understand that, then you'll be able to actually get to read, understand it beyond the simple words that are being put up there. Right? And the second thing is selecting, or rather marking the answer, right? Let me call this one, marking the answer for the question. So I read the question and I don't select the correct answer. Don't do this. Rather, eliminate all the wrong. Right? Trust me, this is very important. I tell students, and I still feel them, getting stuck to this. They read A, B, like they're happy with option B, and then they stop looking at the other options because they are at a mindset that this looks the correct answer. Why should I look at the other options? But imagine this, there is a very good probability in the tricky questions that you'll have two options, sometimes even three options that look very convincing on the outset. Like when you read them, they look correct, they look the right answer. You have to actually eliminate the wrong options and come to this two options. This is a common situation I see with a good number of students. If there are 4 options or 5 options, they eliminate options and they are left with 2 options. And then they're stuck with selecting the right answer and then they struggle with it. Right, so what I would recommend is that is still better, right? You're left with 2 options, you're getting a 50% probability even if you go by some randomness. That is still like, at least if I have like 10 questions and I get 4 or 5 correct, let's say, not exactly 5 out of 10, but let's say 4 or 5, which is still not very bad. Still that's better than, marking and getting much poorer thing. So what I would recommend, I'll also talk about how we can, eliminate all the options and come to the answer. But when you are attempting the RC, my approach coming to the second part of it, right? When you're answering the questions, let's say there are 5 options, right? Read the option. I read it, I don't feel A is the answer. Looks like B is the answer, hold yourself. Look at C, not convinced. Look at D, looks decent actually. Now you have a doubt, so should it be B or D? See, you have waited, that's why you are able to at least come to confusion where you are confused between B and D. But at least you are at a good place than just blindly marking B. And then let's say you are confidently eliminating E, right? Even if you can do this, right? So you're left with B and D. Now look at each and every word of it closely and see if there's a, what could make an option wrong. They could be pretty much right except for a couple of words, or could be a very minor difference. You have to be very careful with that and select the right answer. So when you're practicing the questions, what I would recommend is, whatever the options that you're seeing in a particular question, eliminate them and come to 2 options. That is, you feel in an exam, I would mark B as the answer. If given a choice, let's say the exam gives you a choice that I'll give you 5 marks for getting the first attempt right and I'll give you 3 marks for the second attempt right. That is, if B is wrong, let's say I mark D. If B is correct, you'll get 5 marks. If D is correct, you'll get 3 marks. If B and D, both of them are wrong, then you get 0. Let's imagine a situation like it. Try to think in this way. Still, that's going to give you, a decent score, right? So you'll put both first best answer and the second best answer. So do like that only, while you also mark yourself. I mean, do it in a piece of paper. Write down the first best option, second best option, and then check the answers. I expect you, step 1 of the step 2, right? I'm talking about the 2 steps approach. I'm talking about 2.1. Let me put it like step 2.1. If you ask me, eliminate all options except 2, right? Even if you can do this with 100% accuracy, you will be getting better results than just blindly going with the right answer. Trust me on that. The next step would be to eliminate the last wrong option, right? The last wrong option, and then selecting the right answer, right? Because obviously you're left with one option, so that should be your right option and select it. So write down this. let's say you have taken a mock practice, or you're doing it in some book, or doing it in some of the questions or whatever. First question, I think B is the answer. If not B, it should be D. Second question, I think it should be E. If not E, it should be A. I am very confident that it should not be A, C, or E. I'm very confident that it should not be like B, D, and C. Right? This is what you should do. Then you'll mark only this in this practice. I am agreeing it. Then check if not this, at least if this is correct, and see how many of the questions you got the first thing correct, and how many of this you got the second thing correct, and how many questions you made it completely a mess. Like you thought that this option cannot be the answer, but it still turned out to be the answer. Based on that, you can understand, right, where you're stuck with. If you're getting most of them here, then you're in a very, a bad state. The reason would be that you are not reading the question, reading the passage, understanding it properly. If you're at least at this level where you got 8 or 9 of them being correct in these two options, then you are at least done 50-60% of the job. Right now, let's focus on how to improve from here to come to the right first preference that you will pick. So these are the steps in your growth, right? I'm not saying everyone will straight away come to the right answer. I know some students who does that brilliantly, not much of a preparation, they just mark the right answers and they get it right. That's because they have the habit of reading, they are fundamentally good with the comprehension, that's all what they have been doing all their life, like, reading different material and all. So that for that people it works well. Fundamentally, I wasn't a guy of that type, but I've changed over years, but still, I was still, that's why I built this approach for myself, which I would recommend to others also. That, I started to do this, and slowly I've come from step 1 to step 2, and then step 2 to step 3. That is, eliminate the options properly, then come up with the 2 options which you feel the answer, and then understand which are the right answers. Let's say you think you're not clear between B and D, your gut says that B is the right answer and you mark B, and then most of the cases your gut is taking in the wrong direction, then take anti-gut approach. That is, take this other option as the right answer. I mean, it might work. I'm just saying you have to go with a lot of data sample to analyze your mocks and then come up with it, but that's a different story. But at least do this thing so that you understand where you stand and what you should do from there. Right? So let's get to this. So the author suggests that the work of Fisher and Hamilton was similar in that both scientists conducted their research at approximately the same time. Do we have any clue on that in the passage? I really don't think so. Right? Yes, it says Fisher has put up some theory in 1930. Do I have any clue on when Hamilton has put up his strategy? No clue, right? So it's like information is missing. I don't know if I can so this is absolutely wrong for sure. I cannot give that as a fact. They both sought to manipulate the sex ratios of some of the animals they studied. Did they try to manipulate, like make one of the gender go more in number or other? No, absolutely not. Right? It's like completely opposite to what they try to do. What they try to do is just study how we are seeing stable sex ratios, or maybe for Hamilton's case, the parasitic wasp species ratio case was that there's a skewed sex ratio, but how is that being a stable skewed sex ratio? He at least studied that. So they were not trying to manipulate. This is the problem for me here. Right? This is the problem for me here. Approximately the same time. I don't have a word for this. Sought an explanation of why certain sex ratios exist and remain stable. This looks like a decent option, right? They were both trying to understand, why the sex ratios exist and they remain stable. Most importantly, this is the keyword for me, right? So I'll keep it. I'll hold myself for now. Studied game theory, thereby providing important groundwork for the later development of strategy theory. They did not study game theory. Fisher wrote something similar to the fundamental, like this is based on which the center option is built. Right? It says that Fisher wrote something on game similar to the game theory, which incorporates the essential features of a game theory. Right? Best is something, but Fisher did not study game theory. He did not build the game theory. While he was researching, game theory wasn't even there as an existing part, and they did not do anything related to the strategy theory. So it's absolutely wrong. They did not study the game theory at all. They were studying on this sex ratios and the stability of that. Studied reproduction in the same animal species. Right? So reproduction, maybe they studied, you can argue to an extent, but same animal species not really, right? They did not pick up same animal species as such. We don't have any information on that, and they also did not focus on just the reproduction. They focused more on the sex ratios and how they are stable and all. So this is also wrong. Very clearly that's option C, which is the right answer. It's very easy for us to eliminate the other options, right? I don't even have a problem with other options being same, or at least a bit complicating by letting me to choose something between the two options. This is easy. Right, in this it can be inferred from the passage, right? It's again inferential question. Even the earlier one was an inferential question. That author considers Fisher work to be fallacious and unprofessional. Definitely not, because author was positive, and this is more like, he's disregarding it. It's like a negative. He feels fallacious is like, not correct. It's like full of fallacy. That's like wrong information, wrong interpretation. Unprofessional is not so, right, good. So it's like a complete negative. When you understood that author has a positive feeling towards Fisher's work, we can never take this. Definitive and thorough looks like a decent option in a way, right? I mean, he was positive, but was he that positive? I still don't know. Let's look at it. Inaccurate but popular. Did he talk about it being popular anywhere? He said there are two answers offered, and first one is so and so, second one is so and so. He did not talk about it being popular, and more importantly, he did not say that it's inaccurate, right? It's also a bit, and most importantly, popular is something that I'm not convinced, right? We don't have information. Compared with Hamilton's work, slightly yes, because they've talked about his vast thesis, right? Parasitic, Fisher's theory was compared versus Hamilton's theory in this case. So a bit of that is done, but this one is making me not select it. Admirable, so it's a positive word, looks like okay, but not as up to date as Hamilton's work. This also looks fine, because if you clearly see, as I said, the last line says, right, like Fisher, Hamilton looked for evolutionary stable strategy, but he went a step further in recognizing that he was looking for a strategy. So he was giving slightly more appreciation to, Hamilton. Also said Hamilton offered a remarkably cogent analysis, like more explainable and stuff like that. So yes, he sort of feels that Hamilton's work is better, based on the vast thesis example, just on that example, maybe at least. So this looks like a much better option than just this, right? Definitive and thorough. The problem for me in these two is that this is like making it like a foolproof. This is perfectly right, but that's not how the passage has ended up with. He was agreeing to the Fisher's work in the first half, but the later half he was trying to pick up, some special case and why it's not, how it's not accurate. But trivial compared to Hamilton's work. Right, again accurate is a bit positive, okay, but trivial compared to Hamilton's work is like, trivial is like he's saying a very normal, not as great as Hamilton's work, or complicated as Hamilton's work, or something, which is something I don't think is again correct one. Again, accurate is a problem for me, because yes, it is not completely right, or it's not completely wrong. There are some problems with Fisher's theory. That's what the author was trying to put up it. But most importantly, saying it trivial sounds yes, this is very much disregarding the, Fisher's work. When I say trivial compared to Hamilton's, it is like Fisher's work has been put up in a very lower level compared to Hamilton's work. It's not really put up in that way. It just says that it misses a certain element which is being answered by the Hamilton's work. So I'll go with this as much better option than any of these other options, right? So this is like sort of says, yes, I am positive towards it, but still there are some things that it needs to be, correcting. Accurate is like I'm very positive towards it, right? And then you're suddenly doing it too much of a negative by treating it trivial thing compared to this. Inaccurate is you're talking it's like a negative thing, and then is saying again it's popular, that's not at all talked, and then compared. This part is fine for me, but not this part. Inaccurate but popular is not at all acceptable for me. Fallacious and unprofessional, no. Definitive and thorough also, it makes it too much of positive, again that's also a problem. It has to be like a little bit of positive and a little bit of negative, but this one is too much of negative for me. So maybe I would not deny it. Maybe E is a bit okay to select. I mean, but then if I did not have D, maybe I would select E. Maybe trivial is still too much of a derogatory term for me to say that it's so trivial when he has already praised the Fisher's work so much in the first half of the passage. Right? The option D is the answer. According to the passage, successful game strategy depends on. So here it's talking about the game strategy, right? And if you see, they clearly written one line on the game strategy, the mathematical theory of games. His theory incorporates the essential feature of a game, that the best strategy to adapt depends on what others are doing. That's the only thing. If you understand, you can mark this right. So this is like a specific detail, question. Just you have to understand those two lines. The successful game strategy depends on. The first option is the ability to adjust one's behavior in light of behavior of others. This is like absolutely right. Right, I am confident, but as I said, I will still not stop here. I'll look at the other options. One's awareness that there is safety in numbers. It's absolutely clueless. It's not at all talked about that. The degree of stability one can create in one's immediate environment. Right, again, this is not all referred in the passage. The accuracy with which one can predict future events, no, again, accuracy of prediction, it's not all talked about. The success one achieves in conserving and storing one's resource, again, this is also not all talked. So it's pretty straightforward. Still try to look if there is something which is slightly better than this, but I can't find anything even close to that, right? It's very clear the best strategies to adapt depends on what others are doing. So that's pretty much this, that ability to adjust one behavior in light of behavior of the others. That's right, it's absolutely right. It's a very simple question to mark. It can be inferred from the passage that mathematical theory of games has been developed by scientists with an interest in genetics. Not really, that's wrong. Why? See, again you have to understand. So here they said that Fisher has written something which is fundamentally has a common thing. The essential feature that's best strategy to adopt is depends on what others are doing, which is common with the theory of games and what Fisher has written in this theory, his entire theory. But doesn't mean that Fisher has built this strategy, or that's what it means, that developed by scientists with an interest in genetics. Or I don't have any other clue in the passage which says that scientists with interest in genetics have developed the theory of games. So this is absolutely something I cannot comment. Adapted by Hamilton in his research, do we have anything like that? Not really, right? Hamilton has not adapted. So here it says it is more relevant in the case of parasitic wasp disease, but Hamilton theory has nothing to do with that. He was trying to understand why this stable sex ratio is more skewed to females in the case of this parasitic wasps, and then he gave this theory of that they will store and they will put up this larva and eggs in larva father, and they prefer to have more females than males. That's all the theory that he has, but he has not used the game theory per se. Helpful in explaining how genes can sometimes influence gametes. Again, this is also not really a right statement. Yes, it is sort of discussed here that since Fisher's time it has been realized that genes can influence the chromosomes, gametes and all. They would like to participate in fertilization, but it has nothing to do with game theory has been helpful in explaining this particular thing. That's not written it. Based on animal studies conducted prior to 1930, again that's wrong. It said that even before the Fisher came up with this theory in 1930, even before Fisher has written his theory, right? So Fisher came up with the theory, his remarkable thing in 1930, that stabilized, right, evolution stable strategy, and this was discussed before the game theory was even talked about. That's what the passage says, right? The last line of the first paragraph, it says even before this game theory has been developed, Fisher has written about this. That means game theory was written, has been built after 1930. So how can it be has been based on animal study conducted prior to 1930? And I definitely there is no conclusion or evidence for us to say that it has been based on the animal studies as well, right? There is nothing like that in the passage. So I'm left with no other option, but still I'll read it, right? Has been useful in explaining some biological phenomena. This looks like a decent thing, right? So this one, as they said, parasitic wasps was one case, and the Fisher's theory also has some elements of game theory. So some elements of game theory are relevant or are helpful, in explaining some biological phenomena. If you ask me, maybe this could be a decent second option, but I don't think it has been adapted by Hamilton in his research. It has not at all been, written anywhere. Right, so I would definitely say that's also a very bad option to pick, but maybe B and C could be something some students might pick if you ask me, but I would strongly say they are not right. This A and D are absolutely useless options to pick. B and C, if I say this right, if you have picked it, doesn't mean that you are doing it. Yes, you are doing it wrong. The point is that you have to understand why it's wrong and why you should, change your thinking process, right? So that you don't make this mistake. That's the entire agenda of me talking about why some options are not so good to pick. Right. The last question: which of this following is not true of the species of parasitic wasps discussed in the passage? Adult female wasps are capable of storing sperm. This is absolutely a true statement, so this is not the correct option. Here asking not true, right? I'll show you. So it says not true. Where is this? So it says, where is that? Let me check. It can store sperm. Where is female store sperm? Right? Let me use a different color maybe. Just to female stores sperm. So that sort of eliminates the first option for me. Second, female wasps lay their eggs in larvae of other insects. This is also a right statement. It's written here in the passage clearly that they put up in the larva of another insect, right? noting that eggs will develop in some other host, that's larva of another insect. So that's simply again a false option because that's a true statement. The adult female wasp can be fertilized by a male that was hatched in the same larva as herself. This is also a correct statement. That is the wrong option. Why? It's saying that the female wasp which can be fertilized by male, that is the mating happens between a female and a male wasp which were both hatched in the same larva, which can happen, right? So that's like, you clearly see that the newly emerged adult wasps immediately mate within themselves. As I said, right, 1 male and 9 females. So they, let's say, come from the same mother and they've been put up in some larva. They can come out and they mate and then they disperse. So they can still mate within themselves. So that's basically which is correct. That's why this statement is not a right option. So few male wasps are produced that extinction is almost certain. This looks like a extreme stretch. Extinction, yes, I know there are more females, it's very skewed to females than males in case of this, but extinction is definitely not a case. That's not at all discussed in the passage. No clue has been given for that. So I really think that's a very odd statement to make, and that could be the answer to select. But let's look at the last option. Male wasps do not emerge from their host until they reach sexual maturity. Right, this looks like, okay, let's look at this. Again, it says that newly emerged adult wasps mate immediately and dispersed. Right, so that basically means that whatever the wasps that come out of their eggs are basically matured enough to mate. That's what it means, right? So the male wasps do not emerge from their host until they reach sexual maturity. The passage has written a statement like this, that newly emerged adult wasps mate and then they disperse. So that basically means that they come out and they have reached the sexual maturity. This is not as direct as these other 3 options, but still this is also something that I can accept, consider to be true based on the passage. But this is definitely a false statement, because extinction is too much of a statement to say that there are so few male wasps that are produced that extinction is almost certain. This makes it look like it's 100% true. Right, and passage does not give us even slightest clue for that, so that's absolutely wrong. Right, so that is how you should eliminate the options and select the right answer. As I said, again, step 2.1, eliminate the wrong options. Whenever you do the passage, whenever you practice it, whenever you attempt it in an exam, I would say eliminate the wrong options. At least if there are 5 or 4 options, right, eliminate in such a way that you are left with 2. That is the first step you need to do. Next step 2.2 is, in the 2 options, right, the remaining 2 options, select which is your first preference and select which is your second preference while you practice, and select obviously the first preference and keep the second one aside, and see what is the difference closely between these 2 so that you can understand which one could be the answer, and then mark whatever it is the right according to you, and then look at the analysis later, see how many of your first preference are correct and how many of your second preference are correct, and how many of your eliminated options in the first round are actually correct. That shows you an understanding of where you are lacking right now and what you should do. First step should be, you should reach a stage where you at least have 90 to 100% accuracy, that you eliminate some certain options and they pretty much should not be the answer. And then you should come to a stage where at least you have some 60 to 70% accuracy here. Right, that will at least give you on the whole some 60-70% accuracy in RCs. Right, so that's what I would ask you to look at and understand.